Hey there, it's Ron McCracken. I just wanted to talk for a minute. I'm taking a little break from an extremely hot run. It's almost 9 p.m. and it's still almost 100 degrees in Dallas, Texas. Anyway, wanted to talk about Texas and transgender and Bigfoot and UFOs and living in fear. As many of you know, wasn't too long ago that the idiot governor of Texas, I won't even say his name because it's not worth it, but he signed an executive order basically saying that parents of transgender children who were even exploring gene therapy, much less actually doing it and considering surgery and all that kind of stuff, that they're going to criminalize that, call it child abuse and criminalize it, when that's really something that it's always ironic that the party of small government is always poking their nose where it doesn't belong. Well, that's a decision between the parents and the kid and the doctors. What it reminds me of, it didn't even surprise me all that much I grew up in Mesquite, Texas, which is one of the most homophobic and racist places I've ever been to. Now, I'm sure there are other places even more homophobic or just as homophobic and racist as Mesquite, but I said what I said, folks. I grew up there, so I know. Well, hopefully he's progressed since then. I almost never go there, but that stuff with the transgender thing, well, a few things. First off, one of my best friends growing up in Mesquite was a guy named John O'Reilly, and we became friends because our parents were friends. So John and I were about the same age. So when their parents became friends and were over at each other's house a lot, naturally we became friends. And I spent the night at his house many, many times. He spent the night at my house many times. So got to know him pretty well over the years. We were pretty close friends until about age 13. Then we were going to different schools. Well, we always went to different schools, but then we were off into middle school and high school, and people get involved in sports and band and this, that, and the other thing. So it's not uncommon for people to go in different directions. But we were always on good terms, and he was one of my favorite people to be with growing up. And when John was about 16 or 17, I think, that's when it came out that he was gay. And I remember someone telling me kind of in a scandalous voice, "Hey Ron, did you hear that John O'Reilly's gay?" Kind of in a scandalous voice. And I thought about it. It had been a few years since I'd seen him, but I thought about it for about 10 seconds, and I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Wasn't the least bit surprised and wasn't bothered, because here's the thing. I knew the guy since he was 6 years old. He was always gay. And I'm not saying in YouTube, Facebook, I'm not saying that in a derogatory way. It's just a fact he was homosexual. He was always kind of effeminate. He was always very different. I don't think kind of normal, I don't think he realized until age probably 16 or 17 how different he was. Because he was a good looking guy, smart guy, funny guy. Didn't have any problem getting girlfriends if he had wanted to get a girlfriend. I think that he probably dated some girls in high school, but that thing, like so many people, you kind of start figuring out more and more that you're different. And he's one of many instances where I firmly believe that you're born that way. I don't just believe it, I know it. You're born that way. Well, as I mentioned was someone telling me in this kind of scandalous voice about his sexuality or identity, whatever you want to call it. Wasn't the least bit surprised. He always was. Even looking back, he always was. And speaking of mesquite, that kind of ties in a little bit to growing up. I remember when I was about 10 or 11, this is when this started. I was in the bookstore a lot. My mom would just drop me off there with a few bucks to buy a couple of books. This is when paperbacks were like $2.95 or something like that. And I would go over to the section where they had all the books on Bigfoot and UFOs and the Bermuda Triangle and Loch Ness Monster, all that kind of stuff. Stuff that's really cool for some 10, 11-year-old boys like me. And I basically was just exploring that. I mean, I was fascinated. Hey, is there really this thing called Bigfoot? Hey, are UFOs real? Is there really something to it? And this happened on several occasions. The Bible thumpers, they saw me. Now, the bookstore, not understanding these books, the bookstore placed these books in the occult section. So that was a red flag. And then the religious fanatics in Mesquite, they see this 10, 11-year-old boy reading books about Bigfoot and UFOs and this. And these are grown adults who would come over and start questioning me about it and telling me that I was going to hell for reading books like that. And no exaggeration, not kidding. They would actually tell me, total strangers, grown-ass adults, tell me that I was going to hell for reading books like that. And this was, part of my response was just that, well, as long as it's not where you go, where you're going, I don't want to be where you are. I gave it back to them pretty hard, but also part of my response was, well, maybe God made them too. Did you think of that? And that usually shut them up pretty quick. But I'm pretty sure that all that stems from fear of the unknown. Just like their fear and their phobia of transgender people comes from fear of the unknown. If they do know someone like that in their life, they want to other them. They want to ostracize them and stigmatize them. Kind of doing the opposite of what the Bible says you should. Anyway, but it's that, I'm convinced a lot of it is that fear of the unknown. These are very fearful kind of people. Anything that's doesn't fit in their nice little cubby hole, their little tiny worldview, they want to other it, they want to get rid of it, they want to ban it. Just like when they saw me reading those books about Bigfoot and UFOs, they didn't want me to be able to read those books. And just out of pure fear, it's something that they didn't know, that they didn't understand, so therefore, the same kind of thing is going on with transgender people. And I've said it many times, and I'll state here again, that transgender people have been here as long as humans have been around. So my favorite YouTuber, one of my favorite YouTubers, Trey Crowder, says, where do you think they've been going to the bathroom at? They've always been here. They've always been around. It's not a thing from just the last 10 or 20 years or whatever. But they're living in fear, and this is just something that they don't know and don't understand, so they immediately want to banish it. And the big thing is they don't have the right. It's a frightening time for a lot of people in Texas, especially a lot of parents who have kids that are transgenders, and especially transgender people themselves. It's a scary time in Texas, and hopefully eventually sanity will prevail and people will be left alone to be who they are. But I just want to throw that out there. It's sad. It reflects really poorly upon Texas, because there's a whole hell of a lot of us in Texas that completely disagree with what the governor did and what other religious fanatics, and the governor is a religious fanatic, and I mean that in a bad way, what they're trying to do. Couldn't disagree more, and there are a whole hell of a lot of us. So don't think that all Texans are on board with that. Maybe not even majority of Texans are on board. Maybe, but maybe not. But just want to throw that out there. Anyone who is transgender or LGBTQ, I think they added a couple more letters to that just recently. Anyone who is transgender or parents of transgender kids, hang in there. There are a lot of people like me who are on your side and will fight for you. We will stand up for you. We will fight for you. And maybe that helps a little bit. Maybe that will help you endure what you're going through now. That's it. Just know that there's people who will stand beside you, who will fight for you. And to people who agree with the governor's executive order and agree with any of the LGBT stuff, say that 3 times fast, you really need to re-examine your own life, and you need to examine why you're living in fear and why there's so much fear and hate in your religion, or your brand of that religion anyway. All right, just throwing that out there. Everyone stay safe, and just don't lose your head. We'll prevail in this. All right, take care.